In the annals of criminal history, few cases have left investigators with more questions than answers. When children vanish without explanation, when evidence defies logic, and when the truth seems deliberately obscured by forces beyond understanding, we enter territory where documented fact bleeds into something far more disturbing. What follows is one such case, a puzzle that has consumed investigators for decades, leaving behind only fragments of a horror that may extend far beyond what official records dare acknowledge. But before we explore this mystery, hit subscribe to stay in the loop. It was January 15th, 1988, in the sprawling township of Mamelodi, east of Pretoria, South Africa. The summer heat pressed down on the corrugated iron roofs like a suffocating blanket, and 10-year-old Odette Boucher was walking home from a friend's house when she simply ceased to exist. Her mother, Maria, had expected her daughter back before sunset. When darkness fell and Odette failed to return, Maria contacted the South African police, though in the turbulent final years of apartheid, missing children from townships rarely received immediate attention. The initial investigation revealed disturbing patterns that would only become clear months later. Witnesses reported seeing a well-dressed white couple in a blue sedan speaking to children in the area. The woman was described as middle-aged with short blonde hair, while the man appeared older, wearing glasses and speaking Afrikaans with unusual formality. What made these accounts particularly unsettling was their consistency. The same couple had been observed in 3 different townships over the preceding weeks, always approaching children who matched specific criteria. Odette's disappearance might have remained another tragic statistic, but 3 weeks later, 9-year-old Yolanda Wessels vanished from Eersterust, a colored township north of Pretoria. Again, witnesses described the same blue sedan, the same couple. This time, however, a local shopkeeper named Johannes Milan provided details that would haunt investigators for years to come. He claimed the woman had purchased an unusual combination of items: children's clothing in various sizes, rope, and industrial-strength cleaning supplies. When pressed for more details, Milan mentioned something that didn't appear in official reports. The woman had asked specifically about the nearest veterinary clinic, inquiring about sedatives used for large animals. By March, the disappearances had established a horrifying rhythm. Children aged 6 to 11 were vanishing from townships around Pretoria with mechanical precision. The perpetrators seemed to possess intimate knowledge of each community's routines, striking when parents were at work and older siblings were in school. Local residents began reporting strange occurrences that preceded each disappearance: unfamiliar vehicles parked in areas with clear sightlines to schools, strangers asking detailed questions about family schedules, and most disturbing of all, children returning home with stories of a nice lady who had offered them sweets and asked about their home life. The breakthrough came in August when police received an anonymous tip directing them to investigate a man named Gert van Rooyen, a 54-year-old former teacher living in Pretoria West. Van Rooyen shared his home with Joey Haarhoff, a 37-year-old woman who had been his student decades earlier. The tip proved accurate. Van Rooyen owned a blue sedan matching witness descriptions, and neighbors confirmed both he and Haarhoff had been absent from their home on dates corresponding to several disappearances. What investigators discovered at the Van Rooyen residence defied rational explanation. The house itself appeared ordinary from the outside, but internal modifications suggested a purpose that went far beyond normal domestic life. The basement had been converted into a series of small rooms, each equipped with locks that could only be operated from the outside. The walls bore evidence of soundproofing, and the floors showed traces of repeated chemical cleaning. Most disturbing were the photographs, hundreds of images of children, some clearly taken without their knowledge, organized in files that suggested systematic surveillance of potential victims. Yet for every piece of evidence that seemed to confirm Van Rooyen's guilt, another detail emerged that complicated the investigation. Forensic analysis of the basement revealed DNA traces from at least 12 different children, but the genetic material was degraded in ways that suggested exposure to unknown chemical compounds. The photographs, when examined under ultraviolet light, revealed additional images that had been chemically treated to appear invisible under normal conditions. These hidden pictures showed locations that investigators could not identify, buildings that seemed to exist nowhere in the Pretoria area, rooms with architectural features that defied conventional construction. The investigation took an even stranger turn when police discovered Van Rooyen's extensive correspondence with individuals across southern Africa. The letters, written in a mixture of Afrikaans and what linguistic experts identified as a previously unknown dialect, contained references to the collection and preparation for the great work. Most unsettling were repeated mentions of a location called the White House beyond the Blue Hills, which appeared in numerous letters but corresponded to no known geographic feature in the region. Joey Harhoff's background revealed additional mysteries. Medical records showed she had been treated for severe psychological trauma following her time as Van Rooyen's student, but the specifics of her treatment had been classified by military authorities. Former classmates described her as a normal teenager who had undergone a dramatic personality change after spending time in Van Rooyen's remedial education program. She had reportedly developed an obsession with children's welfare that bordered on the pathological, yet her actions suggested something far more sinister than misguided concern. By early 1990, the investigation had identified 6 confirmed disappearances linked to Van Rooyen and Harhoff, but evidence suggested the actual number was far higher. Parents from across the region came forward with reports of missing children whose disappearances had never been officially investigated. The pattern that emerged was staggering in its scope. Over a period of 3 years, at least 20 children had vanished under circumstances that matched the established method of operation. The case reached its climax on January 31, 1990, when police surrounded Van Rooyen's house with orders to arrest both suspects. What happened next has been the subject of intense speculation and official secrecy for over 3 decades. According to police reports, Van Rooyen and Harhoff barricaded themselves inside the house and refused to surrender. Negotiators attempted to establish communication, but the suspects remained silent. After 6 hours of standoff, smoke began pouring from the building's windows. When firefighters finally gained access to the structure, they discovered both Van Rooyen and Harhoff dead from gunshot wounds in what appeared to be a murder-suicide. Van Rooyen had shot Harhoff before turning the weapon on himself. The basement rooms had been doused with accelerant and set ablaze, destroying most of the physical evidence. However, what investigators found in the ruins challenged every assumption about the case's scope and nature. Beneath the known basement level, firefighters discovered another floor that had been completely concealed from the initial search. This lower level contained facilities that suggested activities far beyond the abduction and murder of children. The rooms were equipped with medical equipment, including surgical instruments and preservation apparatus typically found in morgues. Most disturbing were the industrial freezers, which contained organic material that forensic experts were unable to identify with certainty. The official investigation concluded that Van Rooyen and Harhoff had killed at least 6 children, though the actual number remained unknown. The case was officially closed, but several pieces of evidence were immediately classified by military authorities. The letters mentioning the White House beyond the Blue Hills were seized and have never been publicly disclosed. The unidentified photographs showing impossible locations were removed from evidence, and their current whereabouts remain unknown. Witness accounts of Van Rooyen and Harhoff revealed behavioral patterns that defied normal human psychology. Multiple observers noted that both suspects moved with an unusual synchronization, often mirroring each other's gestures and expressions without apparent conscious effort. Van Rooyen was described as approximately 6 feet tall, with a gaunt build and pale complexion that seemed almost translucent in certain lighting conditions. His eyes, according to several witnesses, appeared to reflect light in ways that suggested possible medical abnormalities. Horrifying presented an even more unsettling appearance. Standing roughly 5 feet 4 inches tall, she possessed an unnaturally youthful face that contrasted sharply with her prematurely gray hair. Children who had encountered her described her voice as different, not foreign, but somehow wrong, as if she was speaking words that didn't quite fit her mouth. Most disturbing were reports that both suspects cast unusual shadows, appearing longer and more angular than their physical forms should have produced. The Van Rooyen case officially ended with the deaths of its primary suspects, but the questions it raised have never been adequately answered. Military involvement in classifying evidence suggests connections to broader networks or activities that remain hidden from public scrutiny. The fate of the missing children was never determined, and no bodies were ever recovered from the burned residence. Perhaps most troubling of all, similar disappearances have continued to occur throughout southern Africa, following patterns that suggest the original investigation may have uncovered only a fragment of a much larger operation. The truth about what happened in that house in Pretoria West may be forever lost, buried beneath layers of official secrecy and destroyed evidence. What remains is the haunting possibility that Van Rooyen and Horrifying were not acting alone, and that somewhere in the vast expanse of southern Africa, the White House beyond the Blue Hills continues to cast its shadow over the innocent. What do you think happened to those children whose bodies were never found? Could there have been a larger network operating beyond what investigators discovered? Subscribe to uncover more cases where official investigations leave more questions than answers.